Hello and welcome to Viewpoint. I'm joined today by Pamela Cohn, a filmmaker and a member of the jury at the Docudays Film Festival, which is on now here in Kyiv. Pamela, many thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You're on the jury at the Docudays Film Festival in the Life category,
Yes.
I believe.
Docu-Life.
Docu-Life. Tell us a little bit more about what sort of films are in this category.
They are feature films from all over the world, including Ukraine. They're new films, fairly new films. Some are made as feature films, some are made for television. There are different styles, different formats, different ways of telling personal stories. And I think that Docudays being a human rights-centered festival, they center on the individual and through that individual story extrapolate into much more universal themes, all of which we're grappling with on a daily basis.
I mean, all the films are from various parts of the world. Is there anything that you can say stylistically or thematically that you've seen as a common thread between them?
Not really. I think the only common thread would be the sort of impetus of an individual to understand another. And what's very interesting to me about all of these films is the relationship and the negotiation between the director and the protagonist in front of the camera, and the relationship that develops through filming a certain story. So all of the stories are quite different. Some sort of talk about larger themes, some deal with much more intimate themes, but they're always very personal from a very specific point of view.
And what about your own background as a filmmaker? Does that influence the way that you look at these films?
I don't think so. I think films more influence me more in how I might want to work and the stories that resonate. I'm very captivated by makers who push form. Documentary can become very static and very structured, and it's very exciting to me to see directors, especially new directors, take a lot of risks dramaturgically, narratively, and otherwise to sort of investigate moving image from a very unexpected place. This is kind of what captivates me. I work with a lot of artists who are interested in doing documentary or nonfiction, and I work with a lot of nonfiction filmmakers who are interested in making moving image installation. So I find this kind of juxtaposition between how you want to show your work and how you want audiences to come to the work a very interesting phenomenon. I mean, cinema is a four-wall. It's very static. We all sit in rows and face the same direction and watch something on a screen, and it's a very particular experience. And
so you're looking there for other ways, I mean, visually to represent the information in ways that might engage audiences in new ways.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Have you seen here in Ukraine at the Docudays Festival a lot of engagement from the audience?
Very much so. I mean, that's really what's always exciting to go to a festival when the surrounding community recognizes rather the privilege of having a big film festival like this in the midst of their city, and realizing that a lot of times these are the only way they're going to see these films, especially short work, on a big screen in a beautiful cinema and have that collective experience.
It seems to me that with a film festival like this, it is a sort of unique opportunity for not just the audience, but also the filmmakers to actually get some feedback, as opposed to, you know, just going to see a film and then you go home and there's no dialogue there. But here we have a forum where both sides actually get to hear something.
That's correct. And as well, the festival supplies these opportunities as so we can, as even jurors and visiting people here to Ukraine, meet the people, talk about our own work. There's a lot of ways of encountering people at the parties, at the cocktails, during lunch and dinner. I'm always impressed when a festival really realizes the opportunity to bring all these disparate people together. And I feel here immediately at home because of that reason. This kind of welcoming into the community itself and not separating us away from everything that's happening around us.
I wonder if you felt any impact at the festival of the events that we've had here in Ukraine over the last couple of years. Now, I mean, the festival, of course, has been going on long before we had this Maidan uprising, the winter of 2013. 2014. But I just wonder, with what you've experienced here this week, do you feel that in some way those events have had a bearing on the audiences here in Ukraine? Are they more politically aware or more engaged now with the issues, or has it now sort of faded into the background?
I don't feel like it's faded into the background at all. I feel like the whole world, if you're paying attention, is going through one upheaval after another. And when it's so close to home, when it happens in your community and in your city and in your country, I think in a certain way it makes you much more curious about the rest of the world. I brought 3 American films here as part of an invitation to bring some films from America. And I was told that these films were chosen because of the way in which they resonate, or might resonate for Ukrainians, in a sense, and what they're grappling with, not just politically, but also on a personal level and on an emotional level. And realizing as well that one person's voice or a small group of people's voices can make a tremendous amount of difference. And when you see that sort of everyday bravery, you know, from normal citizens who are really just trying to get by and lead good lives and create good lives for the generation to come. It's a very moving thing.
And in fact, that's what some of these films that you've brought over, they deal with those sorts of issues.
I hope so. And I feel as well something that's very strange, maybe, that something that doesn't really exist in a culture is also something of curiosity that people want to know about. So in a sense, I feel when everything around you is breaking down, I think collectively you kind of look to things that are going to put things back together in a way, differently, of course, to help everybody move forward in a better way, in a more informed way, and in a more in a way in which an individual feels you actually do have a lot of agency to make change.
And so this is, you mean sort of film can be one of these things, or is it politics or new forms of community?
I am really wary to mash politics and film together. It's kind of an easy thing to do. I would say that you could use film, media, culture, all of it, in a responsible way to sort of inform those conversations. They sort of act like, in a way, pieces that pull together all kinds of disparate topics together into a storyline, into a narrative. And through this way of sharing stories, maybe there's a way of informing and educating. But in terms of a film making a change, I think, again, that happens on an individual level. I think it works the other way around. It starts with an individual and extrapolates from there.
Yeah, because I think in the last couple of years we have seen quite a lot of films as one of the mediums that people have been telling the story of the Maidan and everything that's been going on here. And so do you think that in that way people who otherwise perhaps never thought of themselves as filmmakers, maybe never thought of themselves as particularly political, have been drawn in now into this debate, this conflict, and have really perhaps their consciousness in some way has become more engaged, shall we say? Do you feel that could happen, that is happening as a result of what we've seen?
Yes, I would say so. But for me, documentation and making a piece of art or making a piece of cinema is quite different.
Documentary films are artworks.
Yes, I believe so. I consider them to be so. Because they are constructed. There is an edit, there's production value, there's a way in which everything is enhanced to create a very particular world. It's a little simplistic to say it's a reflection of real life. It's something that someone has worked on to construct a very specific narrative in a very specific way. And as well, I think the more someone films, you can see there's a way in which framing also becomes important, and what the frame holds becomes essential.
Sorry to interrupt you. Just wondering on that point. So what is the difference then between, briefly if you can, so fiction and documentary then? For example, for yourself, why did you chosen to go down the documentary route as opposed to something perhaps even more constructed in terms of fiction film?
Well, I think there's a spectrum there, and I don't really consider there any kind of boundary between genre, actually. I feel like there's a way in which you can play with fictional elements in documentary, and there's a way in which you can play with documentary elements in creating a piece of fiction. And I think that conflation sometimes is the most exciting place to be, to sort of play with point of view, to play with truth, which is a very tricky concept, actually.
Absolutely.
And the way in which we're given information a lot of times is only a very small piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And so I feel someone who takes a camera into their hands and starts documenting, there's a responsibility there. And there's a way in which you need to convey that this is a construction based on how I want to tell this kind of story. That has to differentiate it from news, that has to differentiate it from a more journalistic piece. There's a different agenda involved. And I feel that art making is very much a part of it, because that's what enhances perhaps the understanding, that it may not be exactly what's being said, but it's what you're being shown and how you're being shown, the frame by frame by frame story as it unfolds. Music, for instance, the way the camera encounters someone in a very intimate way, and the way it then can pull out and extrapolate a broader point of view. So all of those things are in play when you're watching a film. And if it's seamless enough and well made enough, you're taken along on this journey. And hopefully for me, something like that will resonate for a really long time. I may not even understand what I've just seen in full. I may be really disoriented, and I may be really confused. And I actually welcome that because it makes me feel like I need to investigate more.
Pamela, I'm afraid we're almost out of time, but on that note, I hope this year at the festival you have seen some films like this which have resonated and continue to resonate. And,
absolutely.
I understand you've still got one more to go. So,
yes, we have our last film tonight, and then we deliberate, and then the closing ceremonies will be tomorrow, where the award winners are announced.
Excellent. Well, I won't ask you, won't press you now, put you on the spot to tell us who's going to win, of course. No. Pamela Cohn, my thanks to you for joining us here in the Viewpoint studio.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We've been joined by Pamela Cohn here in the Viewpoint studio. She's a filmmaker and a member of the jury at the Docudays Film Festival, which is on now here in Kyiv. That's all we have time for today. Many thanks for watching, and do join us again.